Police of Reddit. What dumb call turned serious very quickly. It was dumb and routine before we got there. It was a local, well-known, drunken criminal, jack of all trades, who was playing with fireworks. Not an uncommon thing. However, he was in his living room, and they were very powerful and illegal. He was entertaining himself by lighting the wick and putting it out. He wasn't quick enough one time. The mortar went through his roof, blasted the storm door off the hinges into the front yard. His torso lacerated. Intestines needed to be pushed back in and sewn up. About a year later, almost to the day, he got in a fight with his girlfriend on the interstate highway. At some point they pulled over. He got out. Doors were locked. So he climbed on the hood. She started driving and he fell off. Wasn't even in very bad shape. He was shirtless, of course, and I saw the surgery scars from the year prior. I got the opposite response here. Got a call that a woman was giving birth, so me and a rookie head on over to the address. Rookie was super excited to get to help with this since he hadn't gotten the opportunity yet. So we pull up and his face drops. It's a 50-year-old methed up woman rolling and screaming in her grass saying that she's giving birth to a dog. Anyways, I tell my partner to fuck on out of here and go help the woman deliver that dog. That call went from serious to pretty dumb very quickly. Not a cop. Paramedic here. The police and I were called to a public intoxication. No idea why medics were called, but anyway. The guy was hammered and had been stranded by his drinking buddies because he didn't want to get into the car. Good for him. He was on the phone when I got there and he handed it to me and said I can't talk to her. So I took the phone from him and hung it up and handed it back. Turns out he wanted me to talk to her for him. Whoops. He went ballistic and threw a punch at me. And as he was punching, the cop put a boot in his back. Great reaction time. Still don't know how he did it. The guy ended up smashing his face on the road and suffered a concussion plus some other stuff. This was years ago and I still remember because I felt so guilty at the time. Not me, but my dad, who was a cop and is still a firefighter, had one that I still laugh at. He was working a shift on the police department back in the early to mid-80s and got a call late one night for smoke showing from a residence. His assistant chief shows up first. I should preface by saying he was a fat and lazy duck and didn't properly check and radio dispatch that there wasn't smoke showing and to disregard the fire department. My dad shows up and his AC tells him that it was a false alarm, and my said he was going to check anyway. He said he smelled smoke as he got out of his cruiser and said he was going to check for himself. He opens the backyard fence and down the small hill to the back. As he walked to the back of the house, he saw smoke pouring out of the soffits and saw flames in the back windows. He radios dispatch to have the fire department remain en route, and that smoke and flames visible, and then asks for mutual aid from a neighboring department. Fire department shows up and was able to knock down the fire before it got too out of hand, besides some serious smoke damage. But the house was eventually refinished and still stands to this day. Not a cop, but this is a story from my criminal justice professor from college, who was a cop in North Carolina. There was this house she and her partner had to visit frequently for domestic disputes between a grown son and his wheelchair-bound father. It was never that bad. Mostly just yelling, and the neighbors would call the police to check on them. No charges were ever pressed. So they'd usually just check in and be on their way. They got another one of those calls one day thinking it'd be the same as usual. This time the son is waiting outside for them. The partner is still questioning the son. And thinking the old man wasn't gonna be a threat, she goes inside to deal with him on her own. She announced herself and approached him to talk. He doesn't say anything but suddenly grabs for her gun. She pinned the gun and his hands to her side and tried punching him. Pepper spraying. Anything she could think of to get him to let go. Eventually her partner heard her screaming and ran in to disarm him. And he was taken away. He later admitted he was gonna shoot her and then his son. And she was pretty shaken up after that. Not a police officer, but have a story. Once my dad was dating this woman who had a teenage son. The kid did not like my dad at all. One day, dad and his girlfriend got into a fight and my dad slept in the garage. He woke up to her son and two of his friends holding baseball bats around him. The kids beat up my dad and ran off. My dad called the police to report the incident. But when the cops realized who my dad was, they arrested my dad on the spot for not paying child support to my mom. TLDR. My dad called the cops on his girlfriend's son. Ended up getting arrested. Not a police officer, but something I witnessed and may or may not have had something to do with it. Me and my friends were just chilling at my house playing Call of Duty and Halo. This was 2010. I have very noisy neighbors. Well, we thought we would play a prank on them by calling the cops on them and hope that might shut them up. Well, when we did, we said that we think they have been using and selling drugs. When the cops arrived like 30 minutes later, they busted down the door. We heard gunfire. This soon turned into a gunfight. My neighbor was apparently running his own drug cartel. They had to call backup and everything. I wonder what would have happened if me and my friends had not called the cops. Obligatory not cop but friend of a guy whose dad is a cop. It was actually the reverse. It started seriously but ended hilariously. He went to go bust some drug ring. Who knows what he was going to find? Instead, he found a homeless dude with a syringe. He said, "You shouldn't inject yourself with syringes off the ground. You could get a disease." To which the homeless dude responded, "You see, to me, diseases are like Pokemon. Gotta catch 'em all." Not a cop, but I guarantee the ones involved remember this one. They were originally there to arrest a guy selling drugs on campus. They passed me in a stairwell, on their way up, while I was going to borrow some notes from a classmate. A few minutes go by and I'm back in the stairwell and get passed by the same cops, on their way down and moving quick. Turns out they handcuffed the guy. Sat him down. Did God only knows what. While homeboy Superman out the window head first. From the 11th floor. So that was an interesting day. He lived and he's somehow not a vegetable. Not a cop. But as a McDS worker. We called 911 on a group of teens who came in drunk and unruly. We called because one of them was a little more drunk and tipsy and sat down. Put his head down and passed out. His friends thought it was hilarious. Cops showed up with a smirk at first, figuring it was just retarded teens. When they poured a little cold water on MR passed out and he did not flinch, they stopped smiling. When they looked at his medical alert bracelet they got real serious. Paramedics came and worked on the kid. He survived but nearly died. He was diabetic and suffering alcohol poisoning. His blood sugar was way off. Cops said he would have died if we did not call them. Seeing the cops go from smirks to serious like that was scary. Not a cop. I'm a nurse but I was a vet tech at this time. I went to our main clinic for a meeting which was next to a liquor store. Watched a guy get out of his car, staggering all over the place. We just thought he was just another drunk getting more juice. Then he collapsed on the ground. My co-workers ran over to him and immediately started CPR. Turned out he had been sober for a year but had felt bad all day. He decided he had enough of feeling bad and was going to get a drink. Turned out he felt bad because he had had a heart attack and was in heart failure. He didn't make it. Not me but my dad. Also wasn't a police officer at the time, but a constable. He was going to a guy's house to serve him a summons. As is usual and routine. He got there and went up to the house and the guy answered. As he was talking to him and serving him the summons, the guy pulled out a gun. My dad pulled out his and told him to drop the gun. Instead, the guy then turned the gun on himself and pulled the trigger, blowing his own brains out. My dad was a cop before this though, so it wasn't the first time seeing something like this. Former 911 operator but not a cop. I had a call on 911 from this guy who was very meandering and then it got really real. Hi. So like, I'm calling because there's this car. I think it's a Taurus? Ford Taurus? I guess. Anyway, it's got one headlight on. I guess the other one's burned out. And it's just running with that one headlight on. And it's in this parking lot for a community center. You know. But I think it's closed. So I guess it's like, what's this car doing in this parking lot? Right? Just one car in the parking lot. And it's on. And like one headlight. Oh yeah. And there's twaggas inside slump at a variant theory not moving what? Turned out they were overdosing pretty hard. Not a cop. But I witnessed the event. I was at a McDonald's with a friend and we were sitting down eating when a lady with a cinder block came in. She sat behind a family at a booth with a cinder block on the table. An employee came over and asked her to remove the cinder block from the table and she refused. The employee must have called the police because they showed up like 2 minutes after. She was standing next to the table and was calm, but refused to get the block off the table. The family sitting behind them got up and went to leave because the situation was a little much. When their, maybe 4-year-old, kid jumped out of the booth first. The lady quickly grabbed the cinder block and swung it over her head and tried to smash it on the kid. Somehow she missed and it crumbled on the ground and the dad and the cop flew in and pinned her to the floor. She got arrested. Of course. But everyone was clearly upset. If that lady hadn't missed, it could have been really bad. The family was upset and everyone in the restaurant were asking them if they were okay. Moral of the story: don't go to McDonald's. Not a cop, but when I was a kid, I needed to use the bathroom at Walmart, located in the back behind the tech area. I was using his stall when a guy entered the stall next to me. Being a bored kid, I noticed he had bright, distinct red shoes. Some time passes and I start to hear paper being torn. But thick paper. Like a cardboard box. This dude drops a whole pair of headphones onto the ground. Curses and picks them up. He then tries flushing all the evidence of the box down the toilet. And shockingly, most of it went down, industrial grade. He then left the bathroom trying to act normal. I wait a few seconds and then wash up and peek outside the door. No luck. I walk out and look around. Still nothing. I then remember the shoes. Bingo. I see him walking towards the middle of the store. I walked up to a customer service lady, middle-aged Indian woman, and tell her this dude was shoplifting a pair of headphones. She gets the whole story and calls security. They then have undercover guys watch him, as they can't do anything until he exits the store. I walk off to go find my family. This guy rounds an aisle and grabs me by my shirt and pushes me against the shelf. Hey, what did you say to that lady over there? Reddites. I should have won an Oscar. Oh. Me and her kid go to school together. Etc. He bought it. He lets me go and walks off. A few minutes later, he gets dragged inside by security and taken to the back office. Needless to say, I never went back to that store again. Not a cop. Nor did I see this but heard about it. So apparently this random guy just walks up to my neighbor's house, Alabama, and knocks on the door. As soon as someone answers the door, the guy shoots him dead. Then the dead guy's wife fights off the gunman until the police arrive. Apparently this dude knew the wife from therapy. She was a therapist, and was trying to kill her. But instead shot the husband because he answered the door first. It was some pretty scary stuff. My dad ended up having to sew the wife up at the hospital.